I really think he needs to come forward and explain whether he is actually sending a message to people smugglers that they can keep
people
coming.
see 50,000 people come in by boat. That's more than
is to stop the boats, and the only way...
In terms of the effectiveness of the Refugees Convention...
And to ensnare and trap signatory countries. And I don't think
because they're economic refugees who pay money to people smugglers.
My recommendation is go and
More than 45 million people around the world are displaced by persecution. Over 15 million of them are refugees outside their home country. And 1 million of these are people seeking asylum. They're fleeing war, violence, and religious persecution. But what if you were fleeing your country because the war, the violence, the oppression was personal? It was about who you are, who you loved.
I came to Australia a decade ago with a valid visa, and later on I have applied as an offshore asylum seeker based on the same-sex attracted person.
This is Ravi, which isn't his real name. In fact, for most of Ravi's life, he's had to hide a part of who he is. Growing up in Bangladesh, Ravi couldn't reveal his sexual identity to anyone, not even to his closest friends and family.
Childhood, or the way I grew up in my family or my society, I've been taught, you are Muslim, you can't have any kind of same-sex attraction, you can't have sex with same person, you can't do anything or any kind of same-sex attracted activities because this is against our religious belief and it's a very sinful which you can't get mercy from Almighty. I was threatened by other people that being same-sex attracted person is sinful. I can be thrown to the jail. And the entire experience was very, very bad. And when I realized I should not sacrifice my life, this is my life, then I decided to come to Australia.
Ravi first arrived here on a temporary visa. But after experiencing life in Australia, living more openly and comfortably, Ravi applied for asylum on the basis of his sexual orientation. Australia is a signatory to the Refugee Convention, which means that we're legally obliged to grant asylum to people who flee persecution on the basis of their race, nationality, religion, political opinion, or because they're part of a particular social group. And since the 1990s, Australia has been granting asylum to sexual and gender minorities. But despite the convention, for the people at the centre of it all, the people fleeing their homes, proving you're gay and you need asylum isn't that easy. So here's how you seek asylum in Australia. First, you fill out some challenging forms. Then, an officer from what's now the Department of Immigration and Border Protection interviews you. If your application is rejected, you can appeal to the Refugee Review Tribunal to have it looked at again. But sexuality is fluid. It's slippery. It can change or evolve throughout our lives. It's not something you carry around in a neatly marked box. And for many people fleeing their home country because of their sexuality, they may never have had the chance to express themselves. And hey, they may not even identify with a particular sexual label.
The other thing that I noticed, particularly in your statement, was that you said, I'm still confused about my sexual identity. That suggests to me that you are not a person who has finally made up your mind that you are a homosexual.
Well, it's written like that because I have had sex with a woman as well. And I cannot say that I'm a homosexual if I have sex with a woman. That's in Ukraine.
This is an exchange between a Ukrainian man who is seeking asylum based on his sexual orientation and a member of the tribunal.
Well, I saw where you said that you had had some relationships with women in Ukraine before coming to Australia, but I wonder if you would care to explain to me what confuses you at the present time about your sexual identity.
Well, I haven't had too many contacts, too many relationships. I've had only 2 partners, but now I'm with men only.
But you've now told me that you regard yourself as being exclusively homosexual. Why did you say only a week or so ago that you're still confused about your sexual identity?
Well, I don't know. Because I've had sex with women, I thought that it would be incorrect to write anything else.
The fate of gay asylum seekers is often in the hands of bureaucrats. They judge applicants on just how credibly gay they are. But when one of the decisions to reject an applicant was appealed to the High Court, some of the judges of the High Court found the tribunal had a pretty stereotyped idea of what it meant to be gay.
He did not believe the applicant because of inconsistencies about the first sexual experience, the uniformity of relationships, the absence of a gay circle of friends, lack of contact with the gay underground, and lack of other forms of identification.
I see Oscar Wilde gets a mention, and Alexander the Great, as well as Greco-Roman wrestling, Bette Midler, and Madonna.
In this case, the Refugee Review Tribunal didn't find the asylum seeker's story credible. When the case was appealed to the High Court, the court overturned the decision, noting that it was reasonable that you could still be gay and not be familiar with Bette Midler. After coming out in Australia, Ravi feared that he'd have to return to Bangladesh when his short-term visa ran out. So he applied for asylum.
I had to fight to prove that I'm a same-sex attracted person, sort of have a label on my forehead. I've been advised to pierce my ears and wear the earrings so I can show that I'm different than other so-called Muslim Bangladeshis. And wearing very colorful dress, skinny jeans that time, and skinny t-shirt, and take photographs with a person hugging them, or kissing them even on the cheeks or somewhere. And sometimes go to Mardi Gras party and take photographs with other very identifiable gay people just to prove that I'm one of them.
And Ravi wasn't just advised to change his appearance and take some photos. Desperate to stay in Australia and on his lawyer's advice, he collected written evidence as well.
I had to sleep with someone to prove that I'm gay. That person who I slept with gave a referral letter because he was well-established Australian citizen. So his letter was oathful for me and for the immigration process. That's my perception. I would say it was consensual sex, but I never enjoyed it. I was a dead person. Now it's actually, if someone wants to do the similar thing with me, it will be comparing as a rape. So when I sought the asylum seeker, that's the thing, that I have to prove myself somewhat, that I'm real. And the process to prove myself as a same-sex attracted person was absolutely nightmare.
Ravi's situation sounds quite unbelievable, right? You might be thinking, you'd never have sex with someone just to prove you were gay? But think about it. How would you prove it? How would you talk about your sexual identity if you'd never even spoken it out loud before?
The lawyer or immigration officer, we never met before. So that person on the first day of meeting is asking me, do I do any penetrative sex? With whom? And when did I start with? In our experience being a gay or someone, maybe we do not have very pleasant experience of our first sex. So again, I had to tell the same story once again to that person. And mental pressure, the traumatic experience came back to my back of my head. And again, it's awful.
After an emotionally draining process of questioning and investigation by the Australian Immigration Department, risking everything to flee to Australia, leaving all his friends and family behind, Ravi finally heard he'd made it. He'd been granted asylum. He was free to stay. He's been living in Australia now for the past 10 years, but it hasn't been easy for Ravi to forget how he got to stay. It gave Ravi an insight that many of us will never have into how Australia treats asylum seekers.
It didn't really impact on my current empowerment or self-esteem, which I regained throughout in different process, and thanks to Australian society, so which supported me a lot after getting the approval. So there's two different lives. When I'm an asylum seeker, I'm not an Australian. So I'm not accepted to talk about my same-sex attracted feelings. But when I'm an Australian, no one can tell me what's my sexual preference is. So it's two different issues and two different stages of life.
Ravi's story is just one of many. Today, we're seeing more and more people seek asylum on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity here in Australia. And while the process is improving, many asylum seekers still have to prove themselves by acting out our cultural stereotypes to be considered gay enough to be a refugee.